back again here. My name is Jeremiah Mills, and today I'm going to share with you a very broad subject. And the way that we're going to start it is we're going to start by talking about Abraham and his son Isaac, and how the inheritance has been fought for between the Arabs and the Jews for thousands of years. So they say, the Arabs would say that Ishmael got the inheritance, but the Jews would say that Isaac got the inheritance, and that's what the Hebrew scriptures say. Now the Quran, of course, is going to say Ishmael got the inheritance. And we're just going to look into that a little further and understand the way that Jacob blessed Ephraim, the youngest son of Joseph. And Joseph asks in Genesis chapter 48, Joseph asks him to bless Ephraim. Joseph asks to bless Manasseh because he's the oldest son, and we know that the way the world does it is the oldest son gets the inheritance. But Joseph says, I know what I'm doing, and he gives it the blessing to Ephraim. So if you open to Genesis chapter 48, verses 8 forward, it says, And Israel beheld Joseph's sons and said, Who are these? And Joseph said unto his father, They are my sons, whom God hath given me in this place. And he said, Bring them, I pray thee. Jacob said that, Israel, unto me, and I will bless them. Now the eyes of Israel were dim for age, so that he could not see. And he brought them near unto him, and he kissed them, and embraced them. And Israel said unto Joseph, I had not thought to see thy face, and lo, God hath showed me also thy seed, so I get to see you and your grandchildren. And my grandchildren. And Joseph brought them out from between his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand towards Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand. So he put them where they belong, because the right hand was going to bless Manasseh, and the left hand was going to bless Ephraim. And it says, let me see, and brought them near unto him. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it upon Ephraim's head, so he crossed his arms, who was the younger, and his left hand upon Manasseh's head, guiding his hands wittingly. He knew what he was doing. For Manasseh was the firstborn, and he blessed Joseph and said, God, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac did walk, the God which fed me all my life long unto this day, the angel which redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and let my name be named on them, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. And when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, and he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head unto Manasseh's head. And Joseph said unto his father, Not so, my father, for this is my firstborn. Put thy right hand upon his head. And his father refused and said, I know, my son. I know it, my son. I know it. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. And he blessed them that day, saying, In thee shall Israel bless, saying, God make thee as Ephraim and as Manasseh. And he set Ephraim before Manasseh. And Israel said unto Joseph, Behold, I die, but God shall be with you, and bring you into the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to thee one portion above thy brethren, which I took out of the hand of the Amorite with my sword and with my bow. Now, the reason we just read that is because Ephraim is one of the names they call Northern Israel. Ephraim. So Northern Israel is known as Ephraim. Sometimes it's called Joseph. Sometimes it's called Samaria. Sometimes it's just called Israel. But if you remember, in 1 Kings chapter 12, verses 6 through 33, which is a lot, but I'm just going to keep it short and simple, hopefully. So it says, and King Rehoboam consulted with the old men that stood before Solomon his father while he yet lived, and said, how do you advise that I may answer this people? And they spake unto him, saying, if thou wilt be a servant unto this people this day, and wilt serve them, and answer them, and speak good words of them, then they will be thy servants forever. But he forsook the counsel of the old men, Rehoboam did, which they had given him, and consulted with the young men that were grown up with him, the princes, right? He's consulting with the nobles rather than with the old men who can teach him. He's consulting with his people his own age, the young men. And it says, were grown up with him and which stood before him. Like the aristocrats, right? The rich kids, the plutocrats, the aristocrats, you know, some bratty rich kids, right? And he said unto them, what counsel give ye that we may answer this people who hath spoken to me, saying, make the yoke which thy father did put upon us lighter? And the young men that were grown up with him spake unto him, saying, thus shalt thou speak unto this people that spake unto thee, saying, thy father made our yoke heavy, but make thou it lighter unto us. Thus shalt thou say unto them, my little finger shall be thicker than my father's loins. And now, whereas my father did lay you with a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father hath chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. So Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam the third day, as the king had appointed, saying, come to me the third day. And the king answered the people roughly, and forsook the old men. Sorry about that. Someone tried to call and interrupt me. So the last thing I read is that they forsook the old men's counsel. And so what ends up happening is that he ends up giving that spiel about the chastising with scorpions there. So rather than listening to the old men, he listens to the young men, the men he grew up with. And that ends up turning out bad because Jeroboam leads the 10 tribes to the north. He leads 10 tribes, all of the tribes except for Judah and Benjamin. So they stay down in the south. Oh, so I've already written that, 1 second. So it says right here, so under Solomon, Rehoboam causes the split, and that's when 10 tribes go north, and then, the Simon and Benjamin, not Simon, why do I have that there? Sorry, I confused myself. So I meant to put a J here. So Judah and Benjamin stay in Judah, which is southern Israel, and the other 10 tribes go north with Jeroboam. So Rehoboam's the king here in Judah, and then Jeroboam goes and becomes king up north. Now, just like all of these different denominations, you have the Church of Christ, the Baptists, the Pentecostals, and all of these different denominations. You have Roman Catholicism. They do the same thing. So whenever the Seventh-day Adventists split from the Jehovah's Witnesses, in order to finalize the split, they have to change the doctrine. Now that's what Jeroboam does there in 1 Kings chapter 12, and that's what I was reading, 1 Kings chapter 12, verses 6 through 33. That would be the ones you want to read to learn more about this. In order to finalize the split, Jeroboam makes the 2 golden calves because he doesn't want them to go back to worship in Israel, because then they'll go back to Rehoboam. So Jeroboam, he does what they do in all of these different religions, and he makes a different doctrine. He sets up the golden calves, 2 golden calves, and that's why Amos says, seek not Bethel, and I can't remember exactly how he says it. He says, go not into Gilgal, seek not Bethel, and I can't remember exactly how he says that. Maybe we'll get back to that later. So anyways, Ephraim is what is called northern Israel, and Ephraim received the inheritance. And they split there under Solomon, Solomon's son, Rehoboam. Now 10 tribes go north to northern Israel, and then Judah and Benjamin stay south. So what ends up happening is that by the time Jesus comes on the scene, they had been carried away by Babylon, and then Persia had taken over, and then Alexander the Great comes and takes over. And under Alexander's generals, there was 4 of them. I can't remember their names. But there's the Seleucid Empire, there's the Ptolemaic Empire, and then there was 2 other ones. I can't remember their names right off. But the 4 generals. And then what happens is Judas the Hammer, and this is in the book of the Maccabees, starts fighting against that Seleucid Empire there. And he starts trying to break them away because Antiochus comes down there and desecrates the temple of Israel. And that's where you get that celebration called Hanukkah, because Judas the Hammer fought because on December 25th they had set up their idols, the Christmas idols, and Hanukkah is a celebration about destroying those idols and getting them out of the temples. Hanukkah is about destroying Christmas. Most people don't know that, but if you read what Judas the Hammer did, and that's in the Maccabees, he fought off that Grecian paganism, and eventually those 4 empires would be reeled into Rome. And so when Jesus comes on the scene, that's why you find the New Testament's written in Greek, because the Greek language was common there, the koine, the common Greek language, while they would retain their usual language, which would have been Aramaic by that time. They knew, for business transaction purposes, the universal empire's language, which would be Greek by that point. So eventually, now we're stepping back again, okay? So we know Abraham, his son was Isaac, but Ishmael, the Arabs say, got the inheritance. But now when Jacob has his son, Joseph has 2 sons named Manasseh and Ephraim. He blesses Ephraim, and this is eventually what northern Israel is called. Now, the 10 tribes that went north went into northern Israel, and then a new king was set up there. That's why you, in the book of the Kings, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles, you always have a dual kingship going on. There's the king in northern Israel and the king in southern Israel because of that split that happened under Rehoboam. Okay, now, northern Israel gets carried off by Assyria in 722 BC. In 722 BC, northern Israel, the 10 tribes, get carried off by Assyria. In 586 BC, southern Israel gets carried off into Babylon. And then what happens is, and the reason Babylon's in charge at that point is because Babylon had taken over Assyria. So now Assyria was a universal empire, but then Babylon takes over and becomes a universal empire. Then Persia, and Babylon is modern day Iraq. And then Persia takes over Babylon, and Persia is modern day Iran. And they take over. And then Greece, which is Greece, they take over that empire under Alexander the Great. And then later on, the 4 generals rule for a while, that the empire that Alexander the Great had taken over, they divide it between themselves. And that's where you get the Ptolemies and then the other individuals. I can't think of their names right this second. 1 second, I'm going to step out of the screen. I'm going to get those names for you. Let me see. I can't remember those names, so I might as well look it up for you. So I went and I got my Jameson Fawcett Brown commentary. It's got the Bible and the commentary in it. And I'm just going to open to Daniel. Because I keep telling you about those guys, but I can't remember their names, so I'm going to get their names for you real quick. Let me see if I can find it. Can't always find what you're looking for. Let me see. Okay. Bear with me a moment, please. Okay, here we go. Now, okay, so the four generals' name is Cassander, Lysachamus, or Limachus, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. There you go. So the Seleucid Empire is what Judah the Hammer fought against. Judas the Hammer. So it says right here, it says, the four kingdoms of the Diadochi are successors into which the Macedonian Empire, the Grecian Empire, was divided at the death of Alexander. Alexander the Great was the one who was the king of Greece there. Macedon and Greece under Cassander, it's divided. It says Macedon and Greece under Cassander, Thrace and Bithynia under Lysimachus, Egypt under Ptolemy, and Syria under Seleucus. There you go. So Cassander, Lysimachus, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. Those are the four generals that the empire got divided under Alexander the Great. Okay. So now when Jesus comes on the scene, the Roman Empire had emerged. And that's where you could go into reading about Marcus Antony, I believe his name is, and see the different Caesars, that some of the first Caesars there. I can't remember their names right offhand. So that's why the Romans are on the scene, because this empire had been reeled in under Rome, and now Jesus steps foot. But Ephraim isn't back yet. Judas Maccabeus, Judas the Hammer, had, under his campaigns, they had taken back southern Israel, where Judah and Benjamin were. It's there in Judah there. Now the 10 tribes of the north of Samaria, they're not back yet. They're not going to come back until Zionism. And that's where Theodor Herzl comes into the scene. In 1985, Theodor Herzl begins the Zionist movement, or he's called the father of Zionism. And I'm right here in the Wikipedia article, but it says, beginning in 1895, Herzl wrote Der Judenstaat, the State of the Jews, which was published February 1896 to immediate acclaim and controversy. The book argued that the Jewish people should leave Europe if they wished to, either for Argentina or preferably for Palestine, their historic homeland. The Jews possessed a nationality. All they were missing was a nation and a state of their own. Only through a Jewish state could they avoid anti-Semitism, express their culture freely, and practice their religion without hindrance. Herzl's ideas spread rapidly throughout the Jewish world and attracted international attention. Supporters of existing Zionist movements, such as Hovivi Zion, immediately allied themselves with him, but established Jewry vilified him and considered his ideas as a threat to their attempts at integration and a rebellion against God. Okay, so Theodor Herzl, if you go and look up some of the pictures of the ships arriving in Israel, they have boats, and they have Theodor Herzl celebrating his name off the side of their boats, because he was so pivotal in Israel getting the land back in 1948. So his actions, along with the British actions, and this will lead us into the Balfour Declaration and General Allenby and the actions of Truman later on, President Truman. So if you read a little bit about General Allenby, you'll understand that through his campaigns there in those lands, Israel was able to become a satellite nation of Britain until 1948, when the Balfour Declaration expired and they were actually considered a nation for the first time. Now, if you go to Edmund Allenby, if you type in General Allenby, here on Wikipedia it comes up, it says, Allenby honoring Jerusalem on foot. Allenby dismounted and entered the city on foot through the Jaffa Gate, together with his officers, in deliberate contrast to the perceived arrogance of the Kaiser's entry into Jerusalem on horseback in 1898, which was not well received by the local citizens. He did this out of respect for the status of Jerusalem as the holy city, important to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. See his proclamation on martial law below. The people of Jerusalem saw Allenby's interest on foot as a sign of his modesty. And then he writes, it shows some of the stuff he wrote. But it tells you that the date he did that was on 11 December 1917. So December 11th, 1917. And if you look up the Balfour Declaration, it tells you the Balfour Declaration was a single paragraph in a letter dated 2nd November 1917. Okay, so November 2nd, 1917, and then a little over a month later, that's when General Allenby walks into Jerusalem on foot. And it says, that from the United Kingdom Foreign Secretary Arthur James Balfour to Walter Rothschild. Hey, the Rothschilds are in here. Second Baron Rothschild, a leader of the British Jewish community, for transmission to the Zionist Federation of Great Britain and Ireland. So you can see how through Theodor Herzl's writings and getting the people to start moving back to Israel, and the actions of the British with the wars that they did here, and General Allenby walking into Israel there, that through these different battles and campaigns, they got Israel back, and it became a satellite nation by this Balfour Declaration in 1917 of Britain, up until 1948. It says on May, and I looked up Truman and Israel. It says on Harry Truman, the president, right? It says on May 14th, 1948, President Harry Truman announced that the United States would offer de facto recognition of the new state of Israel. His decision, coming only 11 minutes after the new government was formed in the former British Mandate of Palestine, gave immediate legitimacy to a country that existed only on paper and in the hearts of the worldwide Jewish community. Truman's decision to recognize Israel was one of the most difficult decisions of his presidency. Many of his staff and in his cabinet argued against recognition, in part because it would anger the surrounding Arab nations and threaten access to the vast oil reserves they held. In the end, though, Truman decided to recognize Israel to provide for a Jewish homeland. The decision was largely personal, stemming from his understanding of the Bible and from his interpretation of historical text. He was also swayed by the advocacy of longtime Jewish friends like his fellow World War I soldier and early business partner Eddie Jacobson. In this exposition marking the 60th anniversary of Truman's decision to recognize Israel, his decision is examined through his own letters and handwritten diary entries, through correspondence he had with his Jewish friends, and through the recollections and oral histories of people around him who were in one way or another involved in the decision-making process. So you can go and read more about that. But that's when the Balfour Declaration was no more, and then Israel was no longer a satellite nation of Britain and became its own nation as of 1948. Now, I pulled up here also in Wikipedia the 6-Day War. So the 6-Day War was fought in 1967 between June 5th and June 10th. It's called the 6-Day War. Now, just to read a little bit to you here, because it's important, it says, the 6-Day War, also known as the June War, 1967, Arab-Israeli War, or Third Arab-Israeli War, was fought between June 5th and 10th, 1967 by Israel and the neighboring states of Egypt, known at the time as the United Arab Republic, Jordan, and Syria. Relations between Israel and its neighbors had never fully normalized following the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. In the period leading up to June 1967, tensions became dangerously heightened. Israeli reiterated its 1950 statement that the closure of the Straits of Tiran to its shipping would be a casus belli, and in late May, Nasser announced the straits would be closed to Israeli vessels. So they're going to close the ships out, right? Egypt then mobilized its forces along its borders with Israel, and on 5 June, Israel launched what it claimed were a series of preemptive airstrikes against Egyptian airfields. Claims and counterclaims relating to this series of events are one of a number of controversies relating to the conflict. The Egyptians, I went too far down, sorry. The Egyptians were caught by surprise, and nearly the entire Egyptian Air Force was destroyed with few Israeli losses, giving the Israelis air superiority. Simultaneously, the Israelis launched a ground offensive into the Gaza Strip and the Sinai, which again caught the Egyptians by surprise. After some initial resistance, Egyptian leader Gamal Abdel Nasser ordered the evacuation of the Sinai. Israeli forces rushed westward in pursuit of the Egyptians, inflicted heavy losses, and conquered the Sinai. So they fought the Egyptians. Nasser induced Syria and Jordan to begin attacks on Israel by using the initially confused situation to claim that Egypt had defeated the Israeli airstrike. Israeli counterattacks resulted in the seizure of East Jerusalem, as well as the West Bank from the Jordanians, while Israelis' retaliation against Syria resulted in its occupation of the Golan Heights. On June 11, a ceasefire was signed. Arab casualties were far heavier than those of Israel. Fewer than 1,000 Israelis had been killed compared to over 20,000 from the Arab forces. Israeli military success was attributed to the element of surprise, an innovative and well-executed battle plan, and the poor quality and leadership of the Arab forces. Israel seized control of the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria. Israeli morale and international prestige was greatly increased by the outcome of the war, and the area under Israeli control tripled. However, the speed and ease of Israel victory would lead to a dangerous overconfidence within the ranks of the Israeli Defense Forces, contributing to initial Arab successes in the subsequent 1973 Yom Kippur War. The displacement of civilian populations resulting from the war would have long-term consequences, as 300,000 Palestinians fled the West Bank and about 100,000 Syrians left the Golan to become refugees. Across the Arab world, Jewish minority communities were expelled, with refugees going to Israel and Europe. So, what we've discussed here is the biblical history of Israel, and then it's split under Rehoboam, and then how during Jesus' time only southern Israel was back. Ephraim was not back yet, but Ephraim came back between the actions of 1895 and 1948, and in 1948 and after the 6-Day War, Israel became a nation again a big nation. They became, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, bigger than they were in the times of the Bible. So that's just interesting. That is certainly has to be some kind of a sign, right? So what we would go to now to see that sign is Ezekiel chapter 37, verses 15 through 24. And right before this is where you've heard of the valley of dry bones. Now he goes into speaking of something here that relates to all this. The word of Yahweh came again unto me, saying, Moreover, thou son of man, take thee one stick and write upon it for Judah. Remember, Judah is south, and it had came back during the time of Jesus because of Judas the Hammer and the war against the Seleucid Empire, and they had been back, but northern Israel wasn't back yet. And remember, northern Israel is who got the blessing. Ephraim was the youngest son of Joseph, and he's the one who got the blessing. So Ephraim wasn't back until 1948. And in 1967, during the Six-Day War, and then they got all this territory back, so Israel was back again. It hadn't been a nation ever since Rehoboam, so for 2,600 years or more, they hadn't been a nation until Rehoboam. In 722 BC, northern Israel was carried off, right? So 722 BC to 1948. In 1967, so the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, Moreover, thou son of man, take thee one stick and write upon it for Joseph, southern Israel, and for the children of Israel, his companions. Then take another stick and write upon it for Joseph. So I think I said Joseph twice, sorry, for Judah, which is southern Israel, and for the children of Israel, his companions. Then take another stick and write upon it for Joseph, which is Ephraim, northern Israel. Samaria, Ephraim, Joseph. The stick of Ephraim. There you go. Ephraim. Ephraim got the inheritance, remember? Jacob leaned against the stick, and here it's talking about a stick. Interesting. And for all the house of Israel, his companions, and Joseph, and join them one to another into one stick, and they shall become one in thine hand. And when the children of thy people shall speak unto thee, saying, Wilt thou show us what thou meanest by these? Say unto them, Thus saith the Lord God, Yahweh, Behold, I will take the stick of Joseph, northern Israel, which is in the hand of Ephraim, northern Israel, and the tribes of Israel, his fellows, and will put them with him, even with the stick of Judah, southern Israel, and make them one stick, and they shall be one in my hand. And the sticks wherein thou writest shall be in thine hand before their eyes. And say unto them, Thus saith the Lord God, Yahweh, Behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the heathen, whither they be gone, and will gather them on every side, and bring them into their own land. And I will make them one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be king to them all. And they shall be no more two nations, neither shall they be divided into two kingdoms any more at all. Neither shall they defile themselves any more with their idols, nor with their detestable things, nor with any of their transgressions, but I will save them out of their dwelling places, wherein they have sinned, and will cleanse them. So shall they be my people, and I will be their God. So we can see how literal Israel has become back as a nation, which is insane. That's incredible. But we know that a Jew is not one outwardly, but is one of the heart, and Israel is a spiritual nation. But what's interesting is that these literal signs have begun happening. So we've explained an awful lot here. This is a lot of information to take in. Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, Roman Catholicism, the Protestant Reformation, which is just reforming Roman Catholicism, and then all of the daughters of her that are around now, the Methodists, the Baptists, the Pentecostals, the Church of Christ, all of these different things. The world is very divided. Governments are divided. All these churches are divided, businesses are divided. They set up their own little councils, their own little leaders. Psalm 2, the kings of the earth set themselves. They gather themselves against the Lord, against Yahweh and his anointed, saying, let us break their bands asunder and cast their cords from off of us. And that's exactly what happened with Rehoboam. He scattered them, right? That's what these people do. And then Jeroboam splits from him and creates his own doctrine. That's exactly what all of these church systems do. They split from each other and create their own doctrines. So, let me see. Alright, so one last point to be made is that the terrorist organizations over here. So you have all these different Arab, which would be Ishmael, these terrorist organizations like Taliban out of Pakistan. I can't remember if Hezbollah is the one from Gaza or the one from Syria, so I can't remember. It might be vice versa, but Hezbollah and the Gaza and Hamas in Syria. And then you have Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra Front and ISIS and all of these different terrorist organizations, and they're mad because Israel has this land back. They're mad about that. So I'll go ahead and erase all this. So they're mad that Israel has their land back. So this goes all the way back to Abraham, and he slept with Sarah's babe, Hagar, and they have a son named Ishmael. So when we talk about Hezbollah and Hamas and these terrorist organizations in the West Bank and in Gaza and in Syria, and Al-Nusra Front and ISIS and all of these different organizations, we're talking about Ishmael versus Isaac. That's how far back it goes. And this is, Ishmael is the Arabs, and Arab means half. Half Egyptian, half Jew. And then Isaac is Jew. Now, these guys have these terrorist organizations, and they want the land back, which is the land of Israel. And they had this land for a long, long time. Like, I can't remember how long, but they forced the Arabs out of that land and said it belongs to Israel. So all of those terrorist organizations, Hezbollah, Hamas, Al-Nusra Front, ISIS, all of these different, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, they're all fighting because they want that land back. They want Israel back. They say that the land was stolen from them. And it was. The land was stolen from Israel by Assyria and Babylon. Persia, Greece, and Rome treaded them underfoot. And that's where Jesus says, until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. And now, Israel is a nation of its own, no longer under Gentiles. So, there's no one treading it now. Maybe they'll still have to do some work getting the Arabs out of there. And it's going to be war and fighting to make something like that happen, because they're not just going to give that land back. And they want the land, and if you read the letters from Osama bin Laden, he wrote that Israel, the only way they'll stop with America is if all America converts to Islam, and they give the land of Israel back. That was the two conditions Osama bin Laden laid out. Everyone convert to Islam and give us Israel back. So, anyways, I hope that this helps, and I'm glad that y'all took the time to watch, and I'm going to go ahead and upload these videos. And just one more time to just reiterate real quick, Israel was divided under Rehoboam. Now, Ephraim had been given the inheritance by Jacob, and Ephraim was one of Joseph's sons. Ephraim was one of the names for northern Israel, and northern Israel had not come back like southern Israel had come back during Jesus' time, when Jesus set foot, because of Judas the Hammer and his fighting against the Seleucid Empire, which was one of the generals under Alexander the Great. Now, northern Israel came back, which would be Ephraim, and now the inheritor is back as of Theodor Herzl's Zionistic movement, and then when General Allenby was fighting and got Jerusalem back in 1917 under the Balfour Declaration, and it became a satellite nation of Britain. And then that declaration expired in 1948, and Israel became one complete nation again. So 1948, northern Israel, southern Judah, one nation. And then in 1967, under the Six-Day War, or the June 5th through June 10th, they got a whole lot more land back. And then as of now, the times of the Gentiles has been fulfilled for the most part. But now the big conflict is between the Arabs and the Israelis. So we'll see what happens. Alright, thanks for watching, guys. I'll upload this for you. Alright.